The rain tapped softly against the windows of Mira Halston's modest suburban home, but inside, the silence was heavier than the storm. The once lively house had grown quiet over the years. No more hurried footsteps of children racing through the halls. No more dinners around the old oak table that still bore knife marks from decades past. Mira, now in her early 60s, sat on the edge of her neatly made bed, rubbing her aching knees and staring at a photo on the dresser. It was a faded picture. Her, holding her baby daughter Alina on one side, her little son Ethan on the other. Her husband, Thomas, was behind her, his arms wrapped tightly around her shoulders. That moment had felt safe, permanent. She hadn't known it would be their last family photo. He disappeared not long after that. No note, no answers, no body, just gone. Since then, Mira had been the glue, the foundation, the storm shelter. She worked nights cleaning offices and days doing laundry for neighbors to keep food on the table. She skipped meals so the kids could have seconds. Every school trip, every scraped knee, every broken heart, she was there. Fierce, steady, alone. Until now. It happened so fast. One moment, she was reaching for a light bulb on the top shelf in the kitchen, standing on an old stool that wobbled slightly beneath her. The next, her world tilted, her foot slipped, her arms flailed for something, anything, to stop the fall. The crack of her body hitting the tiled floor echoed louder than her scream. The pain in her hip was sharp but not unbearable. Still, Mira knew something wasn't right. Alina arrived within the hour, perfectly put together as always. Sleek bun, tailored coat, eyes scanning the room like an attorney assessing a crime scene. She barely acknowledged the blood on the floor or the pain etched into her mother's face. "You could have died, Mom," Alina said coldly, her voice clipped. "You can't keep living here alone," Mira tried to protest. "It was just a fall. I'm fine. I've fallen before. You're not fine," Alina cut in, already pulling up something on her phone. "There's a place, Greenhaven. It's beautiful, secure, full-time staff. You'll be safe there." Safe. Mira almost laughed. Ethan was called, but he deferred to Alina, as always. "She makes sense, Ma." "Maybe just for a little while," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Till you're back on your feet?" The paperwork was ready faster than Mira expected. Too fast. She barely remembered signing anything. Between the haze of painkillers and Alina's relentless persuasion, she felt swept into a current she couldn't fight. By the end of the week, Mira was packed into a private car, her few belongings tucked neatly into a pair of luggage bags she hadn't touched since her last hospital visit years ago. As the gates of Greenhaven swung open before them, Mira turned her head to look back at the only home she had ever known. Her fingers clenched around the handle of her cane. Something deep in her chest whispered, "This isn't help. This is goodbye." And for the first time in decades, Mira Halston felt truly, profoundly alone. The front gates of Greenhaven Estates opened with a soft mechanical whir, parting like arms to welcome Mira Halston into her new life. The black car rolled up the immaculately paved driveway, past flower beds too pristine to be real, and lawns trimmed with military precision. Mira stared out the window, a growing unease twisting in her gut. "It looks like a resort," Ethan had said when they first looked at the brochure. "It's not a prison," Alina had added curtly. "You'll have everything you need." But Mira felt something else entirely as the car came to a stop. It was too quiet. No bird song, no chatter. Just the whisper of wheels on concrete and the faint hum of security cameras turning in their sockets. Inside, the walls were soft pastels, artfully designed to feel soothing. The front desk receptionist greeted her with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to Greenhaven, Mrs. Halston. We've prepared a lovely corner unit for you, lots of sunlight just like your daughter requested." Alina, who had arrived in a separate car, nodded in approval and briskly walked ahead, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floors. Mira followed slowly, leaning on her cane, each step accentuated by the echo of quiet halls. The room, or sweet, as they insisted on calling it, was elegant. Too elegant. Ivory curtains, a modern recliner, built-in bookshelves that had already been filled with titles she didn't recognize. A large-screen television she hadn't asked for. But something about it felt impersonal, curated, like she was stepping into someone else's fantasy of her life. "I'll check in again next week," Alina said as she straightened Mira's pillows. "Call if you need anything, but remember, the staff is here to help. Just buzz the nurse." From a proper goodbye. The door clicked shut behind her, and Mira stood alone. The first few days blurred into each other. Her medications were adjusted to help with sleep, though Mira hadn't complained of insomnia. Meal trays arrived with clockwork precision. Every time she asked a question about her schedule, her prescriptions, her doctor, the staff gave vague, rehearsed responses. She tried calling Ethan. Voicemail. She tried calling Alina. Text replies only. "Busy in court. Everything okay? You're safe there, Mom. Don't overthink." Safe. That word again. By the end of the first week, Mira's instincts were on high alert. Visiting hours had changed, now strictly by appointment. When she asked why, the nurse smiled and said, "Policy, dear." The nurse's eyes lingered a second too long before walking away. One afternoon, Mira wandered into the recreation room and found it empty. She flicked on the television, hoping to drown the silence. Instead, she heard it, a hushed conversation through the vents, two staff members whispering. "Her daughter said she's fragile. Keep her on the afternoon dose. Are we adjusting the records?" "Of course. It's already been handled." Mira froze. Her hands began to tremble. Not from age, but fear. She turned off the television and retreated to her room, shutting the door behind her and leaning against it for support. This place wasn't a sanctuary. It was a stage. Every person wore a mask. Every smile had teeth behind it. She wasn't being cared for. She was being controlled, and no one, not even her own son, seemed to see it. Nights at Greenhaven were the worst. The fluorescent lights dimmed at 9 p.m. sharp, casting long, eerie shadows down the polished hallways. The daytime facade of order and polite routine gave way to something colder, something unspoken. The nurses moved slower, their smiles disappeared, and the silence grew thicker. Mira Halston found herself lying awake in her bed each night, the room too quiet, too still. Her thoughts raced in endless spirals, chasing ghosts she hadn't seen in decades. On the fourth night, she awoke at 2:13 a.m., not to a sound, but to the absence of one. The humming of the hallway air vents had stopped. She sat up slowly, heart thudding. Her cane stood against the wall beside her nightstand. She reached for it, then paused. That's when she heard it. A faint creak outside her door. Footsteps, hesitant. Then muffled voices. She was asking again today. Let her ask. She won't remember by morning. Mira froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Were they talking about her? She rose from the bed and pressed her ear to the door. The voices were moving away now, down the hall, male and female, low and smooth, as if trained not to disturb. She waited a full 10 minutes before opening her door a crack. The corridor was empty, silent. A faint antiseptic smell lingered like perfume masking rot. Just as she turned back, something caught her eye. The door across the hall, Miss Cora's, hung slightly ajar. That wasn't like her. Cora was meticulous, obsessive even, about privacy. A retired schoolteacher with a clipped British accent and a deep love for crossword puzzles, she'd become Mira's closest thing to a friend in the facility. Mira stepped into the hallway. "Cora?" she whispered. No answer. She crossed the hall and gently pushed the door open. The bed was made. The room, empty, all of Cora's things. Her knitting basket, her teacups, the framed photo of her late husband, gone, as if she'd never existed. Mira stumbled back, clutching her cane. Her chest tightened. It was happening again, the feeling that the world around her was being edited in real time, like someone trimming film from a reel. Back in her room, Mira sat at the edge of her bed, trembling. She tried to remember when she'd last seen Cora. 2 days ago? No. Yesterday, Cora had brought over a crossword page and laughed at Mira for calling a Cairn Terrier a mini wolf. That had happened, hadn't it? The lines between memory and illusion were blurring, just like they had after Thomas disappeared. That thought opened a door Mira had kept shut for 30 years. She saw it again, the night he vanished. The broken back gate, the unanswered phone calls, the fear in her children's eyes. She had blamed herself for so long. Had she missed a sign? Ignored a warning? Now, here at Greenhaven, the questions crept back like mold under paint. She looked around her carefully curated room, her eyes falling on the mirrored closet door. In it, she caught her reflection, pale, drawn, eyes sunken. And behind her, nothing but shadows. She whispered to the empty air, "What are you doing to me?" No one answered, but the walls held secrets, and Mira could feel them watching. She didn't know who she could trust, or whether her mind was unraveling or being unraveled for her. Mira stood quietly in the marble-floored foyer of Alina's townhouse, the sterile brightness of Greenhaven already feeling like a half-remembered dream. It was her first time outside the facility in nearly a month. The air felt different here, sharper, realer. The kind of air she didn't realize she had missed until it filled her lungs. "I'll only be 20 minutes, Alina said briskly, grabbing her laptop bag and adjusting her coat. "Make yourself comfortable. Don't touch the thermostat. The settings are programmed." "I raised 2 children in a house with no heat for 2 winters," Mira muttered, not loud enough to stop her daughter's heels from clicking out the door. Then, silence. Mira turned slowly, taking in the curated minimalism of the home. Everything was expensive, tasteful, and utterly devoid of warmth. Abstract paintings, chrome fixtures, glass tables that looked like they belonged in a gallery, not a home. A shiver ran through her that had nothing to do with the temperature. She didn't plan on snooping, not at first, but as she moved through the house, something kept pulling at her. A gut feeling. A tightness in her chest that whispered, "You don't have much time." Her eyes landed on Alina's home office. The door wasn't locked. She stepped inside. Everything was meticulous. Files stacked by date, color-coded folders, framed law degrees on the wall. But there was something too clean, too staged. The absence of clutter was a kind of disguise. Mira ran her fingers along the edge of the mahogany desk until she found it. A small brass key taped under the lip of a drawer. Click! The bottom drawer opened with a soft groan. Inside was a leather-bound folder, the kind Alina had always used when prepping a major court case. Mira hesitated, her hands trembling as she pulled it out and opened it. Then her world tilted. The first document was a last will and testament, dated just 2 weeks ago, naming Alina as sole beneficiary. The signature at the bottom, Mira Halston, looked eerily close to hers. Too close. But Mira had never signed such a document, never seen it before. The next was a power of attorney agreement, giving Alina full control over Mira's medical decisions, financial accounts, and property. Again, a forged signature. She flipped faster now, heart pounding. A property deed transfer, moving ownership of Mira's home to a shell corporation, a company connected to one of Alina's former clients. Tears welled in Mira's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. This wasn't concern, this wasn't care, this was theft. Meticulous, calculated theft. Her daughter, her baby girl who she had fed, bathed, defended, and bled for, had been working not just to isolate her, but to erase her. Mira shoved the documents back into the folder and slid it into her purse. She closed the drawer, locking it carefully, erasing every trace. When Alina returned 15 minutes later, Mira was seated calmly on the living room couch, legs crossed, sipping the tea that had long since gone cold. "How was everything?" Alina asked, hanging up her coat. Mira smiled, her expression unreadable. "Lovely, thank you, dear." Inside, her heart burned like fire. She now knew the truth. But the question that haunted her more than anything was, how long had Alina been planning this? And more terrifying still, what else was she hiding? Mira sat on a weathered bench in the courtyard behind Greenhaven, sunlight flickering weakly through the skeletal branches of a dormant birch tree. The stolen folder sat hidden in the bottom of her closet, wrapped tightly in an old sweater, but the contents burned in her mind like acid. Each page, each forged signature had changed something fundamental in her. She wasn't imagining things. She wasn't losing her grip on reality. Alina was trying to erase her, but to what end? Why now? She needed answers. And there was only one person left who might still listen. That afternoon, during visiting hours, Ethan came. He was late. He always was. Dressed in jeans and a rumpled hoodie, he gave her a distracted hug before sitting across from her on a padded chair in the common room, glancing at his phone more than at her. "Thanks for coming," Mira said gently, studying him. Ethan gave a sheepish smile. "Alina said you've been anxious lately. I just wanted to check in." "Anxious," she repeated, her tone neutral. "Is that what she told you?" "She said you were confused about the facility's policies, that maybe you were misremembering things." Mira sat back, folding her hands over her lap. "You ever wonder why Alina's so eager to have me tucked away here?" Ethan frowned. "She's just worried about you." "Is she? Then why would she forge legal documents in my name?" That got his attention. His brows furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "I found them. A new will. A power of attorney. She forged my signature on all of it. And she's transferred the house to a company I've never heard of." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "You're sure?" "I'm not confused, Ethan. I'm not hallucinating. You know me better than that." He was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Okay, if that's true, we need proof." "I already have it," she said. "But there's more. I need your help finding something else." "What?" "Your father's life insurance." Ethan blinked. "Dad? What does he have to do with this?" "He disappeared, yes, but something's always bothered me about how neatly everything ended. The police gave up too fast. There was no funeral, just silence, and I never filed for the life insurance because I didn't want to believe he was gone." "You never claimed it?" "No. I couldn't bring myself to. I never even declared him legally dead." Ethan rubbed his hands together, thinking, if that policy still exists, and if no one's ever touched it, there's a paper trail, Mira finished, and I want to follow it. That evening, after Ethan left, she sat by her window, heart pounding in her chest like it did the night Thomas never came home. She remembered the rain, the police, the neighbors' eyes full of pity, the questions that never made sense. Her husband hadn't just vanished, he'd been swallowed by something much larger. And now, 30 years later, her daughter was trying to bury her the same way. The next day, Ethan called with an update. "I checked the National Claim Database," he said, his voice hushed. "Mom, there's no death certificate, no claim ever filed, the policy's still active." Mira's hand went to her throat. That means Dad might not be dead." The air thickened. Mira leaned back in her chair, the room suddenly too small, too quiet, too bright. The ghosts of her past weren't ghosts at all. They were alive. And they were moving. Mira's hands trembled as she stared down at the faded photograph the private investigator had sent her. The man in the picture was older, graying hair, a beard thickened by time, but the eyes were unmistakable. The same sharp, piercing gaze that had haunted her dreams for 30 years. It was Thomas. He was alive. The realization hit Mira like a thunderclap. She paced her small room at Greenhaven, heart pounding wildly, mind racing to grasp the implications. Why had he disappeared? Why had he never reached out? And most terrifying of all, Why had Alina kept this from her? That evening, under cover of darkness, Mira arranged a secret meeting with the investigator in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. The man, a grizzled veteran named Jack, slid a file across the table. "Here's what I found," Jack said in a low voice. "Thomas has been living under the name Samuel Pierce. A small town a few hundred miles away. He's kept a low profile. No social media, no bank accounts under that name. But I tracked down a few people who know him." Mira's throat tightened. "Did he say why he left? Or why he never came back?" Jack nodded grimly. "He claims he was forced to disappear. Said there were people after him. Dangerous people tied to a debt he couldn't repay. But he refused to say more." Mira's mind flashed back to the years she spent scraping by. The lonely nights, the unanswered questions. Her husband hadn't abandoned them by choice. He had been running. And Alina, her daughter, had known. Jack looked at her with a hint of sympathy. "One thing you should know. Samuel, or Thomas, said your daughter contacted him recently. Not sure what they discussed, but they've been in touch." Mira's breath caught. The daughter she had raised with love, now secretive and cold, was in league with the man she had mourned for decades. The next morning, Mira summoned her courage and called the number Jack had provided. After a tense pause, a gruff voice answered. "Who is this?" "Thomas, it's Mira." Silence. Then a cracked, weary sigh. "Mira, I never thought I'd hear your voice again." Their conversation was brief, but charged with years of pain, betrayal, and unanswered questions. Thomas confirmed he had left to protect the family from dangerous criminals tied to a debt he couldn't pay. He'd believed disappearing was the only way to keep them safe. But now, after all this time, he was ready to face the truth. "Your daughter, Alina," Mira said cautiously. "What is her role in all this?" Thomas hesitated. "She's ambitious, smart, but she's made some choices I can't condone. I think she's trying to take control of things that don't belong to her." Mira's heart shattered anew. The woman she thought was her ally was playing a far deeper game. As she ended the call, Mira felt a steely resolve hardening inside her. This was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming her life, her family, and the truth buried beneath decades of lies. The shadows of the past were no longer ghosts. They were waking. And Mira Halston was ready to face them. The dim light of the small cafe flickered as Mira sat across from Thomas, no longer the distant ghost from her past, but a worn man shadowed by secrets. The truth spilled out between them like bitter wine. "Why didn't you tell me?" Mira's voice cracked, the years of loneliness and sacrifice erupting in a single question. Thomas looked down, ashamed. "I thought I was protecting you, protecting the children. There were men, powerful men, who came after me because of debts I couldn't pay. I didn't want that danger to touch you or the kids. Disappearing seemed like the only way." Mira clenched her fists, struggling to hold back tears. "And Alina? What does she have to do with this?" Thomas's eyes darkened. "When Alina was about 15, she found out. She overheard conversations, pieced things together. Instead of telling you, she made a choice, one that changed everything." Mira's heart pounded. "A choice? What choice?" He leaned closer, voice low. "She made a pact with those men. She offered to use her legal talents, her ambition, to help them recover assets tied to your family's debts. In return, they promised to protect her and her future." The words hit Mira like a bullet. Her daughter, the girl she had kissed goodnight, whispered promises to protect, fought tooth and nail to raise, had sold them all out. Mira's mind reeled back 30 years, to the nights when she heard hushed phone calls, the secretive glances Alina cast her way. The missing money from her accounts, the legal documents that had surfaced in the locked drawer. It all made sense now. Alina wasn't just a cold, ambitious woman. She was a calculated player in a dangerous game she'd been part of since her youth. "But why?" Mira whispered, tears streaming. "Why would she do that to us?" Thomas shook his head. "Ambition, fear, survival. She saw a way out from under the shadow of her father's debt and grabbed it. I never wanted her involved. I tried to warn her, but once you're in, it's hard to get out. Mira's hands trembled as she traced the worn edge of the table. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound. You have to understand, Thomas continued. Alina isn't just protecting herself. She's been slowly building power, taking control of your estate, your finances, even your reputation. This isn't just about money, it's about control. Mira swallowed hard. For years, she had believed she was fighting alone. Now she saw the full scale of the battle. Her own daughter was the enemy. But beneath the hurt and shock, a fierce flame of determination ignited. Mira realized that if she was going to reclaim her life, she had to outsmart the very person she had loved most. The pact that had bound her family for decades was more than a secret. It was a trap, and Mira was no longer willing to be caught. As she left the cafe, the cool evening air filled her lungs. The city buzzed around her, indifferent to the quiet storm gathering within one woman's heart. The fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead was relentless, a harsh reminder that Mira was trapped, not just in Greenhaven, but in a web woven by her own daughter. Days had blurred into one another, the weight of betrayal pressing heavier with each passing moment. But today, hope had a name: Nina. Nina was a nurse Mira had quietly befriended over the past few weeks, a woman who moved through the facility with practiced kindness, but eyes shadowed by guilt. One afternoon, Nina had slipped a folded piece of paper into Mira's hand as they passed in the hallway, a silent promise of help. Now, sitting across from Nina in the sterile break room, Mira unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. Inside was a USB drive. "Why are you helping me?" Mira whispered, her voice raw. Nina glanced around nervously before answering. "Because I've seen too much. The over-medication, the forged records. It's not care, it's control. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't say something." Mira's heart pounded. "What do you have?" Nina pulled a small laptop from her bag and plugged in the drive. Images flickered on the screen, security footage showing staff members administering extra doses of sedatives, logs with falsified times and signatures, and emails between Alina and the facility's management discussing, quote, special arrangements for Mira. "It's all here," Nina said quietly. "Proof that your daughter's orders aren't just neglect, they're deliberate." Mira swallowed hard, tears threatening to spill. After years of fighting to hold onto her autonomy, the evidence was finally within reach. But victory felt distant. Because as they plotted the next move, a sharp knock on the door froze them. The door creaked open. Alina stepped in, her polished demeanor masking the storm beneath. "Well, well," Alina said, voice smooth but laced with ice. "I didn't expect to find you two plotting." Mira's blood ran cold. Alina's gaze swept the room, landing on the laptop. "Nina, I'm disappointed. I thought you were better than this." Nina stood, her jaw clenched. "I'm done being part of this. The lies, the manipulation. I'm done watching you destroy your mother." Alina's lips curled into a smile. "You're making a mistake." Before Mira could speak, Alina's phone buzzed. She glanced down and smirked. "You should know. I've already filed papers to declare you mentally unfit. It's coming through the court next week." A silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Mira felt the walls closing in, but inside her, something fierce ignited. Alina might have the law on her side, the facility, the forged documents. But Mira had truth, and she was not finished fighting. As Alina turned on her heel and strode out, Nina whispered, "We have to act fast." Mira nodded, clutching the USB like a lifeline. Her daughter wanted her out of the picture. But Mira wasn't going quietly. Not now. Not ever. The courtroom was colder than Mira expected. Not physically, but emotionally, sterile, impersonal. A place built for procedure, not justice. She sat beside her attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Lena Farrell, who had been recommended by Jack, the private investigator. Lena's presence was steady, her tone clipped and surgical. Mira found strength in her calm. Across the aisle, Alina sat poised, a picture of elegance in a slate gray suit, lips painted the same blood red she'd worn since law school. She didn't look at her mother. Not once. Her gaze was fixed forward, impassive, detached. The judge, a stern man with silver hair and the posture of someone who'd seen far too many families unravel in front of him, called the hearing to order. Today we will hear arguments concerning the competency and mental fitness of Mrs. Mira Halston, he began. Petitioner, Alina Halston, her daughter and legal power of attorney. Counsel? Alina stood. Her voice was smooth, rehearsed. Your Honor, over the past several months, my mother has exhibited signs of severe memory loss, paranoia, and delusional behavior. She has accused medical staff of poisoning her, and even suggested I have fabricated legal documents, all without proof. I request that the court recognize her as mentally unfit to manage her affairs and uphold my authority as her legal guardian. Mira didn't flinch. She'd heard this script before, whispered in the sterile halls of Greenhaven, murmured by nurses with eyes that never met hers. But today, the lies would not go unanswered. Lena stood. Your Honor, we intend to challenge the validity of those legal documents and present evidence that Mrs. Halston is not only of sound mind, but the victim of an ongoing, calculated effort to isolate and defraud her. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The first piece of evidence was presented, the forged documents. Mira watched as Lena brought in a handwriting expert who demonstrated, line by line, that Mira's signature on the revised will and power of attorney had been copied and digitally manipulated. Then came the second blow, Nina, summoned under subpoena. She took the stand with trembling hands but a steady voice. I was instructed by management, under Ms. Halston's direction, to administer unnecessary sedatives to Mira Halston. I was also told to document behaviors Mira never exhibited to build a case for mental instability. Alina's expression didn't waver, but her fingers twitched. Then, the final blow. Lena clicked the courtroom monitor to reveal financial records, offshore accounts under Mira's name, opened without her knowledge. Money siphoned from property transfers, retirement accounts, and redirected through shell corporations, all traced back to one signature, Alina's. The courtroom was silent. Alina finally spoke, her tone sharp with incredulity. This is absurd. She doesn't know what she's talking about. These are coincidences, errors. But the judge wasn't convinced. I've seen errors, he said. This is orchestration. Lena delivered the final strike. Your Honor, we request that Alina Halston's power of attorney be immediately revoked, that Mira Halston be restored full control of her estate, and that an investigation into financial misconduct and elder abuse be opened. Alina's mask began to crack. For the first time, Mira saw something behind her daughter's carefully controlled face. Not anger, not outrage, but fear. And yet, just as the judge began to deliver his ruling, Lena leaned in to whisper something to Mira. There's a complication. One more account. Offshore. In your name. But the funds are tied to something darker. It may implicate you unless we're careful. Mira's blood ran cold. Even now, with the truth rising to the surface, the noose was still tightening. Alina might be falling, but she wasn't going down alone. The reckoning wasn't over. Not yet. The courtroom was in chaos. Alina's composure had finally shattered under the weight of evidence. Financial records, medical logs, Nina's sworn testimony. She stood, wild-eyed and cornered, the image of a daughter-turned predator, crumbling before a judge and a room full of silent observers. But Mira wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Because Lena's whispers still rang in her ears. There's one more account, and it's in your name. The judge called for order. I will recess for 30 minutes, he said, voice sharp, while we review the final documents submitted by the defense. We will resume at 4 p.m. sharp. Ms. Halston, you are not to leave this courtroom. Alina didn't move. She sat like a statue, jaw clenched, eyes locked on her mother. Mira stepped into the hallway with Lina and Jack, the private investigator. She could feel the weight of years pressing on her, the decades of single motherhood, the betrayal, the loneliness. But underneath it all was something new, fire. "Tell me about the account," she said. Jack opened a thin manila folder. Inside were transaction records, wire transfers, shell corporations, offshore investments, all tied to a single account under Mira's name. But she had never opened it. Never touched it. Lina explained quietly. "It's likely Alina used your identity to launder money, likely years ago. But now, she's positioned it to make it look like you were hiding assets. It's a trap. If we don't move carefully, the charges could shift onto you." Mira closed her eyes. "She planned this all the way through." Jack nodded. "Until someone outplanned her." Lina turned to the hallway entrance. A figure approached. Tall, tentative, nervous. Ethan. Mira's son had always seemed soft-spoken, indecisive. But now, he carried a quiet strength. "I got it," he said, pulling out a flash drive. "It's everything. Emails between Alina and her clients, financial correspondence, private memos from the law firm she used for the fake account. I've been working with Jack for weeks. I just couldn't tell you until now." Mira's breath caught. You were helping me?" Ethan smiled softly. "I was scared. But I never doubted you, Mom. I just needed to be sure, and now I am." She took his hand, squeezing it. "You're stronger than you think." The hearing resumed, tension thick in the air. Lina presented the flash drive with quiet authority. "Your Honor, we now submit evidence that not only exonerates Mira Halston of any financial wrongdoing, but further implicates Alina Halston in a long-term scheme involving identity theft, elder abuse, and fraud." The judge's face darkened as the images and emails played across the courtroom screen. Alina stood abruptly. "This is manipulation! Lies! I built everything I have!" "You built it on stolen ground," Mira said from across the aisle. Her voice was calm, final. "And now it's collapsing." The gavel struck. "I hereby revoke all legal authority granted to Alina Halston. Criminal investigations will proceed. Mira Halston's full rights are restored effective immediately." Applause broke out in the back of the courtroom. Mira felt her knees weaken, but Ethan caught her. Outside, the air was warm and golden. For the first time in decades, Mira stepped out not as a victim, but as a woman free. Alina was taken into custody moments later, eyes burning with disbelief as the cuffs clicked shut. And yet, the story wasn't over. That evening, back at her home, reclaimed, quiet, and peaceful, Mira found a letter waiting in her mailbox. No return address, the handwriting familiar. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single line, handwritten in sharp, slanted script. "You thought Alina acted alone?" No signature, just a second slip of paper, a photograph of Mira, taken from afar yesterday. Her breath caught. Someone else was watching. The war wasn't over. But this time, Mira was ready.